I wanted to follow up on my earlier video that I made when I added the Wi-Fi throttle to my ride-on engine. And actually I want to use the footage that I took on the Garden Railways Gala weekend as a backdrop. I might talk more than what footage I have, so you might see the same pieces of footage coming up multiple times. This was the second time I used the Wi-Fi control, and I had a little bit more experience now because well, it was a full weekend, so I was driving the local for both days of the weekend. And actually, I think my end result or my final decision is that after all, I'm going to drop this Wi-Fi throttle. And there are two main reasons why I would do this. So the first thing is actually incidents that happened over the open weekend. And actually there was two incidents that happened. It happened once every day. I mean, what I experienced is that I was driving the local. I think in both cases it happened shortly after I left the station. So when I started my round. And I think in both cases I was accelerating rapidly, and the loco would just stop responding to the throttle. And of course I was pulling gas, and the train was running, so it was a fairly scary experience. And I sort of expected this to happen, and I was no longer sitting at the back of the train. I was sitting on the front, just like I would do with a wired throttle, so I could reach over the engine and flick the main switch and then basically kill the loco. And the passengers, I don't think, have experienced anything because the loco just kept running or kept rolling, and I only needed a couple of seconds for the power to go, and then I restarted the engine and everything was fine. And I think what happened is in both cases, because I was accelerating a little bit more rapidly than I used to, I suspect that maybe the battery voltage dropped too low for the buck converter, which is powering the ESP, to supply proper voltage, or something around these, because if anything would happen to the ESP, it would normally restart. But I think there is these brownout states for the ESP, and I think that's usually associated with power voltages or improper voltages, where instead of just restarting, which I would only notice by a short cutout, maybe not responding for 2 seconds or so, it just stops responding. So it basically just hangs. And actually this was something that was highlighted to me in my previous video, because I was thinking about all these scenarios. What happens if the throttle stopped responding? What happens if the connection is dropped? And all these things. But the one thing that I haven't counted for is what if the receiver ESP stops responding, because then it would send whatever last command that it sends to the motor controller to to go to a certain speed would not be followed up with another command, and the controller would just say that okay, I need to go at 50, so I will keep driving at 50. And the controller itself doesn't have any fail-safe built in for loss of communication, because it wouldn't expect that communication to be broken. There could be like a physical cutoff switch, but that's just the same as the master switch on mine, so that wouldn't really help. So anyway, this happened, and after each of these incidents, I was just driving a little bit more slowly. I mean, even if I put full throttle on, the loco wouldn't go any faster, because again, it doesn't have enough power to accelerate that fast, so the wheel would just keep spinning. So I was just driving normal, and then it didn't happen anymore. And also what I did is, if I knew I would be standing at a station for a longer period of time, I would just switch off the loco. So by that I would just restart the ESP. So that was one thing, and I think it might have also happened at home. I'm saying might have also happened because I wasn't around, so my kids were playing with the loco, and then there was just well, I wasn't sure if it was a big bang because I was in another part of the garden, but actually the loco derailed. And then the way they told me is that the loco just ran away, they couldn't stop it, and then it stopped, derailed on a tight curve. Actually, nobody was sitting on that. So nobody was hurt, but I just had to, touch up the paint. Nothing serious has happened. And probably the same thing could have happened in that case because the loco was coming up on a hill, and then maybe it was starting slowly because of the hill and the fact that the motor was not powerful enough. They might have applied too much throttle, which increased the current draw a lot, and then maybe have dropped the battery voltage again. So that's reason number one. And reason number two is the fact that I also explained in the previous video that there is a noticeable, I'm thinking like, sub 1 second delay between you operating the throttle and the response from the loco. And I thought, well, this is not a big deal. I can just get used to it. You drive the loco like that. I mean, after all, it still, responds and accelerates. In my home layout, it is a little bit more crucial because there are a lot of tight curves and grades where you really need to work the throttle in order to keep the loco keep the momentum of the loco. And that's something that my kids definitely disliked. So they really feel that there is less response from the loco, and that rotary encoder is probably just making that a little bit even worse because you don't have that physical feedback that a physical position of the throttle corresponds to the actual throttle value. So for these two reasons, I think I'm going to retire the throttle, the Wi-Fi throttle. I think probably the timeout issue could be resolved with some better coding. Maybe I could also replace the throttle with a regular pot instead of the rotary encoder. So that would also help you to sort of physically visualize the position of the throttle and the actual throttle value. And also, if this is indeed a brownout issue, which I can only suspect, that could also be prevented if I could use a separate power supply for the ESP. Maybe I can use some sort of power bank or like a battery backup where the battery provides the stable voltage and the main battery on the loco just charges that 5-volt battery, like a power bank or something like that. So I think there is a solution for everything, but it just seems to be too much for not enough gain, or not the type of gains that I initially thought. And so riding the loco at the back and just the fun of driving the loco without anyone sitting on it, it doesn't feel like such a great value for me to go through all these hoops. So I think what I will do is I will definitely go back to a wired control, and I think what I'm going to be doing is I will use a regular port and switches to act as a master switch, the direction switch, and the throttle control, so just like before. But I'm thinking that maybe I'm just going to keep the two ESPs for all the other functions. So my previous throttle, I had like 3 UTP cables, so 3 times 24 wires. So I have enough signal wires for all the lights and sounds and everything. I think I can replace that with 2 ESPs talking to each other, and maybe instead of talking over Wi-Fi, what I can also use is I can use CAN bus, because ESP supports the CAN bus. So instead of all these wires for every single lights and sounds, I can just use 2 CAN bus data wires, and just have a bunch of buttons on the controller, and then that will actuate the sounds and the lights on the receiver side. But if everything goes wrong, I will still have complete control over direction, throttle, and braking, and worst case scenario, the audio or the lights will stop working. And then I was thinking a little bit more, because maybe if, since I have all of these, what I can also do is I can also hook up some sensors to the ESP, which is in the loco. So I can have, for example, temperature probes and of course battery voltage monitoring, and maybe some other things like current monitoring. And I can also add an SD card, so I can do logging. And the reason I'm thinking about all these, because the one addition that I really liked about these Wi-Fi throttle, besides, well, not actually the Wi-Fi thing, but with the communication to the Sabertooth controller, I could get the voltage of the inside voltage of the driver chips. And that was a really good indication if everything is going okay. So I could really feel that the loco is running as usual, because I could guess how much it heats up during each cycle. And even if I would go back to the 4QD DNO10 controller, I might just add a temperature probe to the heatsink, so I also get some sort of feedback of, just to make sure that everything is going right, it's not overheating, nothing like that. So, and that would be that, temperature sensor thing that I was talking about, and that value can also be sent back to the throttle, and then maybe have a dial or a screen or something like that to show me that information. So I would find it useful. I think that would be, quite nice to add. So these are the lines, or these are the features I'm thinking along. I don't know if I would ever get there. Definitely there is lots of ideas here. I also need the time to implement them. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that would be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.